Hey all. Alright, so what I want to lay out here for you is kind of a broad overview, 60,000 feet of our federal and Nevada court systems. Obviously, right, the bulk of the content that you're responsible for is going to be in those narrated slides that you can either consume as the original PowerPoint presentation, which makes all of the links that are there clickable, or you can just look at the YouTube video version of it, in which case, right, you do lose the functionality of some of those otherwise clickable links. And then, of course, the readings from our text, Chapter 9, and our readings from the Bowers book as a PDF file in this module, Module 9. That might also be Chapter 9, which is only coincidental in Bowers. All right, so with that out of the way, things that I want to highlight, I guess, about our federal and Nevada court systems. One would be note, right, Nevada is part of the Circuit Court of Appeals, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, right? That's what we're part of here in Nevada. I think we're grouped in with a bunch of other states like California, I believe Oregon, Washington, Hawaii, maybe Arizona, right? So those states geographically grouped together in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. Fun fact to know and learn. Has historically been our most liberal Court of Appeals. Although that can change, right, depending on who's president and who's named the most people to a particular federal court. All right, what else? The U.S. Supreme Court obviously is top dog. Something there that I think we may have talked about in the context of talking about the U.S. Congress, but just in case we didn't, right? We know that the use of the filibuster in the Senate has been narrowed over the years. The initial narrowing was engineered by then Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid to make it so that the Senate could no longer filibuster nominations to the lower federal courts. All right. And that might have also included presidential nominations to the federal bureaucracy. That's not generally a big deal because it's so rare for the Senate to filibuster a nominee to the federal bureaucracy. But a bigger deal, right, for the lower federal courts. I remember that was born at the time. The context was that Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, right, was trying to shepherd through President Obama's nominees to the lower federal courts, and Senate Republicans had really just paralyzed that whole process and said, you know, we dislike President Obama so much that we're going to filibuster damn near every one of his lower judicial nominations, lower judicial court picks to the Circuit Courts of Appeals and the district trial courts. And Reid's like, well, that's some bullshit right there. Because then we need 60 votes to overcome that. We don't have 60 votes. Obama's ability to get anybody on the lower federal courts is now 0, and that's bullshit. And so we're going to get rid of the filibuster for lower federal court nominations. And I believe they threw into that mix nominations to the federal bureaucracy, not as big a deal. Right, and then Trump, in an unlikely turn of events, defeats Hillary Clinton by the narrowest of margins to win the college in 2016. He becomes president in 2017. And you have that open Supreme Court seat because Senate at the time, Senator Mitch McConnell, who had become Senate Majority Leader in the midterm election of 2014, right, so in place by 2015 in January, he had refused to allow Obama to name a replacement for the recently passed away Justice Antonin Scalia, a conservative. Right, Obama ended up nominating an older Democratic moderate by the name of Merrick Garland, almost a year left in his term, and McConnell wasn't having it. Right? He's like, no. We're going to keep that open just in case Trump manages miraculously to win the White House, which he did. Right? So then you got that open seat as soon as Trump comes in, and Democrats are like, screw you and the horse you rode in on. we're going to filibuster this because you screwed over Merrick Garland, so we're going to screw you over. And Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell's like, well, to heck with you. We're going to get rid of the filibuster as well for Supreme Court nominations. So that's gone as well. All right, so the rules on the filibuster and how you can use it have narrowed over the years, especially on nominations to the federal bench. Now you just need a straight majority. Or in the case of Biden, right, during his first 2 years, he needed all 50 Democrats and Kamala Harris as a tiebreaker as vice president. Yeah. So that's worth knowing. So the confirmation process for these judicial nominations has become the more standard 50% plus one to get them on the bench. Used to be you needed however many votes you needed to overcome a filibuster and invoke cloture. Most recently it was 60. Now you need just 50 plus one. And maybe that's as it should be. Right. Other things to note here. Yeah, Trump benefited from Mitch McConnell holding open that seat under Obama. That was, kind of dirty pool, but hey, what is it? Harry Truman said, if you want a friend in Washington, get a dog. Dirty pool is the order of the day, especially these days. Kill or be killed. So, right, Trump got that one right away, which arguably he shouldn't have. Democrats should have been able to replace a Republican with a Democrat. That would make the court now 5-4, right? 5 Republicans, 4 Democrats, which seems a little more appropriate given that we're a 50-50 country, and if anything, maybe more Democrats than Republicans by a small margin. So it's a little weird in essence to have a court that's a supermajority of Republicans in an era in which Republicans are manifestly not in the supermajority in terms of we the people. So Trump gets that open seat right away, right? Replaces Scalia with another Republican, and then another Republican left the bench when Trump was president. And that was no big deal because you're replacing a Republican with a Republican again. But then you get Ruth Bader Ginsburg. I know it was Kennedy who had retired, a Republican, but he was a moderate Republican. And Trump replaced him with a conservative Republican. So that moves the court a little more to the right. Right? And then, of course, Ruth Bader Ginsburg passes away in the last, she passed away in November of 2020, maybe October. Was it just before the election? I can't quite remember. So she passes away. She should have stepped off the bench much earlier, is what many would argue, so that Obama, earlier in his presidency, could have replaced her with a fellow Democrat. She doesn't want to leave the bench. I don't know what this is. People who think they can never retire, never leave. I'm like, leave. You're not indispensable. You're not George Washington. You're not indispensable. None of us are. And that's okay. She apparently thought she was indispensable. She holds out deep into her 80s, extremely sick with all sorts of medical issues. And somewhat predictably, but somewhat randomly, she passes away just before Trump leaves office. And Trump's like, yes! Yes! I get another one, a third pick on the court in just 4 years. And here I get to replace a Democrat with a Republican. That's why the court's 6-3. So that's stuff to know. Yeah, and there was some talk that under Biden, Democrats would expand the court's number to 11 from 9. It's like that. This is Spinal Tap mockumentary, right? 11. It goes to 11. But it's not going to go to 11. I think there's reasons you might want to do that, right? 9 is not a magical number. Used to be a smaller number than 9. But we've been on 9 now for a long time. It's become kind of tradition. And it can be hard, and that's okay sometimes. It can be hard to break tradition. So plus the partisan implications are so strong on either side. Neither side's going to let the other get those extra 2 spots were that to happen, expanded to 11 from 9. So 9 it is. 6 Republican, 3 Democrats. Right? And the court has been mostly quite conservative. Chief Justice John Roberts used to be the swing justice, right? Whichever way he voted, it would normally be 5-4 when there were 5 Republicans and 4 Democrats. That gave him a lot of power. He was the most moderate of all the Republican justices, arguably. But once Ruth Bader Ginsburg was replaced by Amy Coney Barrett by Trump, then he's no longer the swing justice. Sometimes he gets outflanked now by his more conservative Republican brethren. So you would say now the swing justice might be Brett Kavanaugh, who's more conservative than Roberts. Yeah, so it's a remarkably conservative court. You'll note, right, that the most conservative Supreme Court justice in the modern era, Clarence Thomas, and not by a little, but by a lot. He's a pretty unique figure, both in terms of arguably his corruption on the bench, but also his profound conservatism. It's quite remarkable. Quite remarkable. Even for this very conservative court, he's off the charts. That's saying something. Let me tell you, that's saying something. He has no sense of boundaries, in my own humble opinion. All right. I probably talked too long. What else do I want to say here? The courts have always been significant since at least Marbury v. Madison in 1803. They seem in some ways more significant and pivotal these days because our elected branches are often so paralyzed. They seem to be stepping into the void to make things happen politically. They're a playa, as they say, a playa. They are the least dangerous, I think, of the 3 branches of the federal government, but they're still pretty dangerous. Still pretty dangerous. And right now, right, conservatives are beyond thrilled that they have a supermajority on the court. And the court has mostly been that, right? Striking down liberal policies, upholding conservative ones. Very predictable. But they've issued some surprising decisions. Upheld an important part of the Voting Rights Act recently. Struck down that insane independent legislature theory regarding federal elections. That kind of was a no-brainer. Even Thomas didn't want to rule the other way on that one. He just wanted to punt and say that it was a moot issue so they wouldn't set a precedent of rejecting that theory. I think even he realized. I think he would embrace it if he thought he could get away with it, but there's not enough votes on the court to support that position. So Thomas's backup plan was to say, let's just not even decide the case. But 6 members of the court said, no, we're gonna decide this and reject it because it's insane. That's the idea that a state legislature should be able to decide the outcome of a federal election with no checks and balances from either the governor of that state or the Supreme Court of that state. That it should be the legislature with total unilateral authority, right? And obviously, former President Trump wanted that to be the way things were, right, going into 2024, because he figures, look, what could happen in 2024? I lose those same damn states that I did before that were all 50-50, and I lost all of them. I think there were 6. Understandably frustrating, but hey, life isn't always a smooth sail, you know. And then his hope was, look, I think in all 6 of those, Republicans control the legislature. Or at least they did. They may have lost control in Pennsylvania. But in general, right, the legislatures in those states are controlled by Republicans. So his hope was, if we can get the court to accept this lunatic theory that the legislature can decide who won, I feel good about 2024. Because even if I lose, right, I think I can get these legislatures, enough of them, to say that I won because of unspecified fraud. So that was rejected. Thank you, Jesus, for that, quite honestly. That was one of those efforts, I think, by Trump and MAGA forces to undermine the quality of our democracy. I understand the desire to win. I think we understand that desire to win. But we also, I think we believe still, a little bit here in America, that you should win by playing by the rules. And if you lose, you got to stand up and take it and accept it and move on and fight harder the next time, but fight fairly. All right. Nevada's courts. Thing to mention there, right? We generally have judicial elections that are nonpartisan, But it's also true that a lot of judges and justices in Nevada, like in other states, they leave the bench before the end of their 6-year term. And when they do that, the governor gets to unilaterally name a replacement. And that happens more than you might think, because these are not super prestigious jobs like the U.S. Supreme Court. You're not going to get many who stick around until they die. A lot of them leave, somewhat randomly for reasons of family, or they want to retire a little bit early, or they want to take a job in the private sector, or, whatever. Right? So pretty regularly you get people stepping down from Nevada's courts midterm. And then the governor gets to replace them unilaterally, and then as soon as possible there's an election. Although typically, right, the incumbent wins judicial elections, just like in the U.S. Congress. And I will say this about Nevada's state courts. They're not as deeply ideological as in a lot of states these days, like in Wisconsin or Pennsylvania, or West Virginia, Texas. We've never gone down that road. We might still, but we haven't yet. Right? Our courts are mostly staffed by moderate Republicans and moderate Democrats who don't engage in deeply ideological judicial decision making. So that's been a godsend. And as a result, we have not seen the money pouring into state judicial elections that we've seen in other states. We know we're getting a lot more money in there than we used to because of the Citizens United case by the Supreme Court back in 2009. But because the ideological stakes are not that high here in Nevada, the money is not as high. And I think that's a good thing. At some level, I think as a political scientist, politics should be at least somewhat boring. We don't need the excitement of January 6th, 2021. We don't need that kind of excitement at the U.S. Capitol building. Excitement is typically poison to a democracy. Boring institutional governance and de-escalated conflict is the way to go, quite honestly. All right, I've talked far too long. Thanks.